Welcome back to the channel, and today we have a very informative video for you, because clearly none of my other videos are probably all that informing. And that is going to be sort of your guide to suppressor or silencer mounting, and what are the differences between some of them, as well as what are the different types that exist. So first off, we're going to talk about the most simple, and that is going to be direct thread. So for all of these options, what is basically going to be very, very common is that there's a universal mounting system that is 1.375 by 24. And what they call that is hub mounting. And most of these, or all of these actually, are going to be in that sort of thread pitch size to allow you to put this into the back of your silencer and then attach it on a gun. So the first is direct thread, and this would go into the back of your silencer and is the most simple because you just directly thread it onto the threads of your rifle barrel. So there would be no muzzle device. You just literally take the A2 flash hider or whatever type of device is on your rifle, and you would throw this puppy on. Now, not particularly in any order, but this is probably my least favorite QD system on the table, which stands for quick detach, if you didn't know, is the SureFire mount. So this is SureFire's QD system, and it is a little late to the game in terms of being released. However, SureFire did finally come out with this. And so the way this works is you've got your muzzle device. And if you notice, before I put it in here, it's got some little tapers and some slots that basically interface with this right there. So you heard it click in, and then you would rotate that around. Now, here's the couple of reasons that it's very, very good. So the first one is it's definitely rock solid when it's locked down. You're not going to really get a lot of issues with this mounting system. I don't know if I've really ever seen any. Doesn't mean they haven't existed, but I've not seen them. The downsides to me, though, is one, relative to some other offerings that are on the table, the SureFire mount is incredibly long. So just the device itself adds probably almost 2 inches from where it would thread into the back of the can. Another big issue is you sort of can hear this locking mechanism. That works really great on the can, but after you have fired this a lot and gotten some carbon buildup inside of these threads on the inside, this likes to be what's called carbon locked. And what that means is there's so much carbon that builds up, it basically gets in sort of the just really tiny nooks and crevices on the inside and prevents this from wanting to unlock. So that is our first QD system. Our second is a combination of two, and it's the exact same system, just parts are made by different manufacturers, is basically the Plan B Q style system. Now, these are not particularly Q products. However, this is Rearden Manufacturing, which is probably one of the best known muzzle device companies currently making just various QD system mounts. And this is Method Dynamics, who just makes their version of the Q Plan B system. So the way this works is it simply threads on righty-tighty, lefty-loosey and goes into your can just like that. So what it utilizes to basically keep everything on is there's this little tiny taper that happens right before the sort of ports of this muzzle device. And that is going to create a ton of friction and a ton of force on those threads when you thread this in, because it has its own sort of female attachment taper. And that is going to keep your device on. Now, a couple of pros to this relative to the SureFire mount, it is significantly shorter. Another big plus is that it's a lot simpler than something like this, where you have to put the muzzle device in and then ratchet something down. And it accepts a plethora of other companies' muzzle devices, as well as many different sizes of their own. So let's say you don't have a very large distance between the back of your can and that first baffle. You can make this a lot shorter, or have a much shorter muzzle device, and then still be able to use this particular system. A couple of downsides, I guess really only one, and that is going to be that because this is righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, if you do somehow manage to carbon lock this or thermal lock this when it gets hot and expands, you do run the risk of basically unscrewing this muzzle device off of your firearm depending on how you attach it. So if you rock set this or like really well Loctite this, probably won't be an issue, but it is possible. I've seen it and I have done it. Our next system is also technically a combination of two devices, and that is the Huxwrx Striction lock. However, it is effectively a adapted version or their version of something very similar that is made by Dead Air, which is Dead Air's Xeno mount. So the cool thing, and the reason I picked both of these specifically, is because although Huxwrx makes their own muzzle devices for the Striction lock and Dead Air makes their own attachment hubs for their Xeno, they also work together. Now, if I can get this on, the reason that was so difficult for me, clearly, is because this is not righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. This is actually lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. Yeah, I got that right. Couple of really awesome things. As you can see, this is still an incredibly short mount. It's effectively the same size as the Rearden Method Dynamics mount. And it is lefty-tighty, righty-loosey, and the massive benefit to that is a couple of things. One, it has much larger threads, so it's a lot harder to like really mess these up relative to some like much more fine threads. But since it is lefty-tighty, what happens is when you shoot this, it effectively rotates the can and creates friction on the same taper that you find on something like a Q, Plan B, or Rearden mount. But this taper is a lot more pronounced, so it creates a ton of force. And when you go to take this off of your can, it's actually tightening your muzzle device down, so you actually have something to sort of resist against to get the can off. This is probably one of my favorite styles of mounts, especially in the lefty-tighty category. Our next offering is a pretty cool one because for the longest time people have requested this as well, but that's going to be the Huxwrx QD system. Now, if you take a normal Huxwrx QD device, it will thread directly into the back of their cans. They have their own built-in. However, they now have their hub-compatible muzzle device adapter. So this is a cool one for a couple of reasons. One, as you can still see, it's pretty short compared to other ones, but this is also lefty-tighty, and once that's all the way in on the taper, this also tightens down as well. And so this gives you a really cool option. So just like on the SureFire, how you kind of ratchet this down, this one uses both inactive and active retention systems by having a taper and by a screw system. And of course, there's a ton of different muzzle devices for these as well. So if you want something a little different than this particular one, or you want something a little bit shorter, that is also an option. And like I said, this is probably one of the best QD system designs that it has existed for a long time. Now, to the last QD system on our list, that is going to be the Rugged Rum. This is unique and cool for a couple of reasons. I would say relative to some of the other ones, it's still just a little bit long, but it has two different ways that it can attach. So there's going to be these teeth that are on the inside of this that can basically interface with some of their muzzle devices and ratchets down so it won't come out. The other cool thing is that this also takes very similarly to the Huxwrx and the Xeno, or technically the Rearden as well. This also has some very large, probably the largest in this entire list, threads on it. And once this is screwed in and tapered, you have the same thing where you can basically tighten this down and it's not going anywhere. Now, just like Chemo, which is made by Dead Air, which used to be, I would say, a very popular muzzle device, it also is significantly longer than most of the things on this list. It's sort of in the realm of the SureFire, but it is not nearly as robust as this. So this is actually rated for up to 300 rum, which is where the name obviously comes from. And that is very, very beneficial because that's an ultra high pressure round. And if I were to shoot 300 rum on something, I would not want the actual QD system that the silencer stays attached to the gun on to fail. So this is a super robust system. It is a little bit longer, but for the added security and just the added beefiness of this system, if I really wanted it, I could take it. So that is just a couple of my favorite QD muzzle device options that exist, including the direct thread mount, and we'll see you on the range for the next one.